A refreshed Democratic Party gathered for a valedictory speech from President Joe Biden, whose decision to end his re-election bid released newfound energy with Vice President Kamala Harris's rise to the top of the ticket. The Democratic National Convention that began on Monday in Chicago. Now, this convention holds particularly high stakes for the party 1 month after an unprecedented mid-campaign switch from Joe Biden to Kamala Harris. The opening night was designed as a handoff from the incumbent to his hand-picked successor, albeit 4 years before he intended for her to follow him. But Democrats are looking to the week-long event to slingshot Harris towards what many would say a face-off, a direct face-off with Republican Donald Trump, whose comeback bid for the White House is viewed by Democrats as an existential threat. Having taken over the ticket just 1 month ago, Kamala Harris must now win over a divided country that is viewing her more positively, but still making up its mind about the election. Now, a potential distraction during the convention will be thousands of protesters that are descending on Chicago to decry the Biden-Harris administration's support for Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza. In fact, a few thousand people have marched towards the United Center, we're told, the site of the DNC. This was on Monday afternoon, and a group that called itself the Abandon Biden Movement held an event to rebrand itself as Abandon Harris. The group argued the vice president's inability to differentiate herself from Biden's handling of the war, and they said that this was not acceptable. But Harris's allies hope the pro-Palestinian protesters will not overshadow this official program, which features a slate of current and former Democratic stars, plus what organizers describe as everyday people. We actually have a reaction from Kamala Harris from the DNC in Chicago. Listen in.
It is so good to be with everyone this evening in this hall and everyone at home. This is going to be a great week. And I want to kick us off by celebrating our incredible President Joe Biden, who will be speaking later tonight. Joe, thank you for your historic leadership, for your lifetime of service to our nation, and for all you will continue to do. We are forever grateful to you. Grateful to you.
And we have with us Katherine Gypson, straight from the DNC, joining us. Thanks so much, Katherine, for making time for us as always. Many people I'm speaking to are saying it's a very precarious time for Kamala because a false step could actually hobble Kamala Harris at a point when a candidacy has been enjoying a burst of money, momentum, and even joy, because many are highlighting that there are real questions about the depth of Harris's newfound support, the breadth of a coalition, and the strength of a movement as we speak.
Well, it's certainly right that this has been a whirlwind couple of weeks for Vice President Harris. Unexpected that she would step into this nominee role here at the United Center in Chicago behind me so late in the election, 100-something days to go until Election Day in November. And of course, we have seen an incredible outpouring of fundraising support, social media support, and grassroots excitement. We're seeing her coming ahead in the polls in some key swing states that she'll need to turn over to secure that electoral college win. So yes, the expectation is that at some point there has to be a stumble. There has to be an end to this so-called honeymoon period. What we do historically know is that conventions always give nominees another boost in the polls. So at least for the time being, as Kamala Harris makes her case to the biggest audience yet in the United States, she is likely to come out of this convention with another boost to her candidacy.
Right, Katherine, but a potential distraction during this convention that you're in Chicago will be thousands of protesters that are descending to decry the Biden-Harris administration's support for Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza?
That's right. You know, we already have seen some of those protesters here on Monday. We've seen a handful of arrests. They have diverted some of the traffic. Right. I can personally speak to that it's hindering the security. But we also see an enormous amount of security within this perimeter around the United Center. A lot of safety, hundreds of Secret Service, Chicago police that are going to be making sure that this isn't going to interfere with the event.
Right, Katherine, also, many political scientists are arguing at this stage that Kamala Harris has painted herself as a tribune of the middle class and her opponent as a servant of the wealthy few. Would you say this is a sentiment that's being echoed amongst American voters? Is this an accurate assessment?
Well, I think she is giving the classic Democratic message that they will help the middle class. All of these new proposals that she unveiled this week in terms of the economy, giving support to first-time home buyers. The corporate tax rate is going to be risen, according to people within her campaign today. She is making that case that the economic tough times that some Americans have been experiencing would end under her presidency.
Also, Katherine, the crucial issue of immigration. Now, the fact that American voters have moved right on immigration, does it necessarily mean that Democrats would actually benefit electorally from doing the same?
Well, it certainly means that they need to find a compromise. Earlier in this year in this country, we had a bipartisan group of senators who hammered out an immigration deal, and Donald Trump told those Republican senators not to vote for it. It is going to be very difficult for any president of any party to get a deal on immigration in this country. It is such a contentious issue. Donald Trump, of course, knows that. He's headed to the border state of Arizona this week to campaign. We absolutely anticipate that he will hammer Kamala Harris on her immigration record and make the argument to American voters that his way is the right way when it comes to enforcing immigration.
Also, many at this point argue that if there's that one thing that could sour the Democratic ticket's good vibes, it's a smear campaign that tars Kamala Harris as a radical. In fact, some also assert that Kamala Harris is actually selling liberal policies in conservative packaging. Is this something you've picked up on as well?
Well, you know, it's an attack that is very familiar from Republicans to Democratic candidates. A lot of American voters feel very uncomfortable with the concept of socialism. So if you make that accusation, it's something that resonates with them. But I think there's a sense that the argument that Kamala Harris is making is getting some traction. She's saying we're not going back. We're not going back to the 4 years of the Trump presidency, and is making that argument that American voters have already seen what he would do in the White House. Now it's time for a change.
In fact, Kamala Harris has rolled out more of a policy agenda, by the way, proposing to increase the corporate tax rate to 28% from 21%. Could you tell our viewers more about that?
That's right. So that is something that was just announced this afternoon. It's part of the Harris campaign unrolling her economic policy proposals, along with the first-time homebuyers credit that I mentioned earlier. She is making that argument that middle-class Americans have been ignored for too long, and that with these policy proposals, she can start building the economy back to where they feel healthy and thriving.
Katherine, always a pleasure to chat with you and hear your insight. Thanks so much for joining us live from Chicago, from the DNC.